everyone, this is Katie from Katie Loves Classic Books, and I'm here today with my April wrap-up. So if you just watched my previous video, my March wrap-up, you'll know that it's the same day, and I'm finally caught up with all my wrap-ups, and now I'm going to conclude with April. So in April, I read a lot of books. So this might be a little bit of a longer video, so grab yourself a cup of tea or coffee or something and settle in with me to hear about the books I've been reading. So the first book I read this month was Shogun by James Clavell, and this was published in 1975, and I gave this 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. So this is a historical fiction novel set in Japan, and in the year 1600, and it kind of deals with relations between the East and West at the time, and also some of the political drama going on in Japan at the time. We follow 3 main characters. One, Blackthorn, an Englishman who is the first Englishman to set foot on Japan, and then a man named Toranaga, who is a powerful daimyo who kind of wants to gain more power in Japan and possibly become shogun. And then a woman named Mariko, and she's a translator, and she kind of becomes torn between love and duty and her religion. Anyways, this was a book my boyfriend got for me, so it's not something I would have necessarily picked up myself, although I did really enjoy it. It's a long book, and it takes a long time to get through. I read this mostly in March, just finished it in the first few days of April, so it was quite a commitment. I did feel like I lived in it while I was reading it, but that's a good thing, you know, for me to still feel like I lived in it versus that I was like stuck with it or something. Shows that it was still a very vivid book. I do feel like everything was explored, like every event that would happen would be really dragged out, and it was explored a lot. And I kind of got used to that style, but I do feel like perhaps I would have liked it better if things were like speeded up more. But you know, one event would take like 50 pages to get through, and I was like, that's kind of a long time to stick with this like one incident. But that's okay. Historically, it was very interesting. Learned a lot about Japan in the early 17th century that I did not know about. And and I felt like there's a lot of historical details and stuff like that, so that was really cool. And the characters were very interesting, and you just become very attached to them. I think Mariko was my favorite out of the 3 main characters, just because I could get on board more with, her feelings and what she wanted in life. Blackthorn and Toranaga are both ultimately after power, so I just felt like for that reason it was hard to always get on board with them and love them. But still, they were very interesting characters that I still found myself rooting for. Blackthorn becomes super immersed in Japanese culture, which I really liked and found interesting, and I liked his relationships with both Mariko and Toranaga. Toranaga was rather a harsh guy, but yeah, underneath the surface there was like a little bit of a jolly part of his personality, and I enjoyed that side of him. So this was a pretty interesting book, and I'm glad I read it. If you're interested in historical fiction set in Japan and that sort of thing, then I recommend this, as long as you're ready for the commitment of reading quite a long book. James Clavell wrote other books in a series he calls the Asian Saga. They're very loosely linked. He just sort of goes through different periods of history in Asia and sets his stories there. And I think I'm interested in continuing to read them. Maybe just not for a while, but we'll see. While I still enjoyed this, I do feel like this is a little bit more of a dude book. So If you're a guy, you might like this a little bit more. Not that like women and men can't enjoy the same things. And like I read a lot of books by men with main characters that are men, and I don't necessarily feel that way. I don't come away with it and being like, oh, it's kind of dude fiction, but I did with this, but I still really enjoyed it. So you know that might not have anything to do with anything, but I'm just saying, if you're a guy, this might appeal to you a little bit more, but not necessarily. The book I read in April was Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert, who was a French author, and this was published in 1856, and I gave this 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. So, this book is about a woman named Emma who becomes dissatisfied when she gets married, and she turns to various means to eradicate the boredom of her life, including adultery, mostly adultery, I should say, although also some excessive spending habits and things like that. Now, I've heard that Gustave Flaubert took a really long time to construct a single sentence. Now, I'm not sure if he did that with this book or not, but I kind of can see how that's true. Everything that happens, everything that's said seems very deliberate and never extraneous. And for that reason, I feel like, I got pretty hooked into this novel and that it moved along, at a good pace for a novel of its time. Now, I wish I could read Madame Bovary in its original language of French, because I feel like I would be able to see that deliberation and the artistry with which he crafted a sentence, which I feel like I just can't because of, the translation into English. But I still kind of get that feel from it, and so I did quite like his writing. I really enjoyed the setting as well in provincial France. Some lovely descriptions. Although Emma is very bored with where she lives out in the country. She thinks it's not as exciting, and she thinks, life in Paris would be better. But I quite enjoyed the setting, even if Emma doesn't. As far as the characters, I feel for Emma at sometimes, and then I disliked her at others. Like, I understand her boredom with her life, especially when this is read in the context of the time period it's in. It's understandable. And I even understand why she gets bored with her husband. And so while I understand her a bit, I also felt kind of bad for him because he was kind of a nice guy. Although, I don't know, maybe just not observant as to what she needed, but I still felt bad for him and her daughter especially. One of the men she has an affair with, I wasn't really a fan of at all, and I thought she was really foolish to go for him. And another man I did like and was kind of rooting for him, but I don't know, things took a weird turn, and perhaps I disliked Emma's behavior in that situation more than anything. Anyways, but this was a very interesting novel that was, beautifully written, well crafted, and just a very interesting exploration of human relationships and overall dissatisfaction and boredom. There's something about it I couldn't quite love. I did really enjoy this. I thought it was really good. But perhaps just because of the subject matter kept me just one step away from totally loving it. But it was really wonderful, and I do very much recommend this French classic. And I haven't really heard much of Gustave Flaubert, but I would like to read more of his work, and I did look up some of his books, so I'll get to those in the future. I finished in April was The Shining by Stephen King, and this was published in 1977, and I gave this 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. So, The Shining follows a man named Jack Torrance who gets a job at the Overlook Hotel in Colorado to be a caretaker during the off-season. And he brings along his wife and his 5-year-old son, Danny. He thinks it'll be a good chance for them to bond, for him to get on his feet again, to work on a play he's been writing. But things definitely take a turn for the worse. His son, Danny, has special psychic abilities for The Shining, and he sees beforehand that bad things could happen if they go here, and things just seem to escalate. This book did its job in the fact that it definitely had me on edge. It was definitely more fast-paced and thriller-y, although it had like a wonderful psychological depth to it, which I enjoyed. But yeah, this book did have me on edge a lot. I maybe made a bad choice, and that went away for a few days to stay at a friend's house of mine to cat sit for her all by myself, and this was the book I decided to bring along. And yeah, so I was on edge a lot, and I tried not to read this too late at night because it was kind of creepy. But yeah, it had quite a nice depth to it. I have seen the very famous Stanley Kubrick film of this before, and it was nice reading the book now because a lot more things were explained, and like I said, there's a lot more character depth to it. Yeah, I liked all the allusions to horror fiction of the past. There were a lot of references to The Mask of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe, and I read some Edgar Allan Poe stories in February, so having recently read that, I really appreciated that. There were a lot of direct quotes and references to that. And I also felt quite a big allusion to Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House as well. So that was cool. And Shirley Jackson was mentioned at one point too, so that was pretty cool. Yeah, and just the characters are really interesting. Danny was my favorite. I mean, how can you not sympathize with him? But his abilities were really cool. It was really interesting reading about that. And he just seems like, not unbelievably so, but just like a very mature, strong 5-year-old, and you just can't help rooting for him, and I just really enjoyed his character. I really liked Halloran, the cook, too, who also is The Shining, kind of helps Danny out. The mom, Wendy, you can't help feeling bad for, and rooting for as well, and everything she has to go through. And Jack's a hard one. He's partly someone you would sympathize with and partly not. Like, you do see that some of his love for his family and whatnot, and his desire to kind of be a better person, they're there, but he has 2 demons in his closet that kind of get to him with all the paranormal stuff going on, which is some past violence, very strongly linked to alcoholism, and yeah, so it's difficult whether you like him or not. It's interesting too, something I question, but something that's never explained is, does Jack have the same abilities Danny does? I don't know. That was something I kept wondering, but was never explained, so that's not really a spoiler or anything. But he seems to see a lot of the things that Danny sees, but Wendy doesn't, so I don't know. Interesting thing to note. And yeah, in terms of father and son relationships, there was a lot of exploration of that, with kind of abusive relationships, but yet there's still love, like your father's abusive, but you can't help loving him anyways. Yeah, so that was kind of difficult, but interesting to read about. Anyways, yeah, so this was an interesting and scary paranormal classic of the horror genre. Yeah, and I do recommend it if you're interested. If you've seen the movie, which I'm sure a lot of people have, the book is well worth the read, and you just get a lot more out of it and get a lot more exploration of things. This is the second Stephen King book I've read. The first one I read was It, and I loved it a lot more. But this was still really good. But I just think it has just so much to it. It's a lot longer too, but I really recommend that one if you're looking for a really good Stephen King book. But yeah, this one is good too, and I will continue my Stephen King journey at some point. I mean, he's extremely popular and he has a lot of books, and I do find his books interesting so far, and I am interested in reading some of his other ones. I kind of am more interested to start out with, as obviously I've done so far, some of his earlier work. So I will continue to read some of his books. I'm thinking of reading one around Halloween, so look out for that. The book I finished in April was Murder in Mesopotamia by Agatha Christie, and this was published in 1930. Oh my gosh, I forgot already. Let's see. 1936. And I gave this 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. So, this golden age mystery novel is told from the perspective of a nurse named Amy Letheren. And she is sent to take care of an archaeologist's wife, Mrs. Leidner, at a dig site in Iraq. And while there, she notices that Mrs. Leidner is really on edge and that there's just a lot of tension in the air. And then murder strikes, and the very famous Belgian detective Poirot is sent to solve the case. So yeah, this was just so enjoyable. It's been a really long time since I've read an Agatha Christie mystery, and it was just really fun to read one of her books again. This is the 5th Agatha Christie book that I have read, and very much enjoyable. Yeah, in terms of, like, the mystery was very interesting, and I just, like, was very absorbed in it. But also just, there was psychological depth as well, especially when it came to the intricacies of relationships, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. Yeah, and so this book is set in Iraq, like I said, and so far I really like the Agatha Christie's that are set abroad. I know I've heard some people say that they prefer the ones that are like set in England. Maybe I need to read more of those ones, but I actually quite like the abroad settings. They're fun. But I wish, setting-wise, I just wish that more of the story took place at the dig site and had to do with a little bit more of the archaeology, because most of the story was set at like a house that all the people involved on the dig were staying in. But I still think the house was described very well, and like the mystery took place there, so you really needed a good picture of it to like see kind of what was going on, which she did a very good job of. There was even a map of the house included, which I appreciated. Yeah, and all the characters are very interesting. Some explored more than others, obviously, but I enjoyed them all. A good cast of characters in a smaller area, which just always makes for a good mystery. And Poirot was wonderful. This is the 3rd Poirot book that I've read, and I really enjoy him as a detective, and I really enjoyed him in this because it's from somebody else's perspective. You just get to see the descriptions of what he's like, and I found that really delightful and even funny. Yeah, and the mystery was surprising. The most surprising of the books of hers that I've read, but I was still surprised. I did not guess what happened, and I find that aspect of her books always so brilliant. She really comes up with very surprising things, so that was really cool. Yeah, so while I loved this, it was not like the absolute best of her books that I've read, but I just found it so delightful, and it had depth to it, and it was interesting, and the setting was cool, and the mystery was fascinating, that I couldn't help but give it 5 out of 5 stars and to love it. And yeah, this was just kind of, I know it's so weird that we call mysteries, which are kind of gruesome, cozy, but Golden Age mysteries just have a coziness to them. And mysteries were one of the first things I ever loved to read when I was younger. When I first was able to read, it's something I was really drawn to, like Nancy Drew and Sherlock Holmes and all of that sort of thing. So yes, I just find mysteries very nostalgic and lovely to read. Anyway, so I recommend this if you're interested in Agatha Christie mystery, a Poirot, and maybe you want one set abroad. I finished in April was the Essential Rumi, which is a rather large collection of Rumi's poetry that has been translated by Coleman Barks. So Rumi was a Persian poet and Sufi mystic in the 13th century, and most of his poems center on spirituality and connecting with the divine. So this was not my first time reading Rumi's poetry. He's been a favorite of mine for quite a while, but I decided to pick up a larger collection of his poetry back in November. Yes, I've been reading this since November, because I was getting a quote of his tattooed on me, which I have since gotten. It's on my ribcage. It's really beautiful. So I decided to read some of his poetry, but between wanting to take my time with it started out with me wanting to take my time with it, so I was reading it slowly, and I would just forget to pick it up. And pick it up sometimes, read a few poems, and so that's why it's taken me till April to finish this. But it's not really something you would rush through anyways. It was nice to take my time with. And Rumi's poetry is just so wonderful. It's such a spiritual experience reading his poems. When you read his poems, it's like, at least for me, it's not like they can really be understood in a rational way like how you read other things. It's more just something you just feel or maybe understand, like on a spiritual level. And it's just a really cool experience. And he's truly a wonderful person, and his words are so beautiful, but you can tell he's not really concerned about the wordplay or crafting his words right. He's concerned with using that to kind of channel the divine and inspire you to connect to that divinity as well, which is so cool. So it was a really wonderful experience reading more of his poetry. I gave this 4 to 5 stars on Goodreads. It's such a large collection poetry that I feel like with all large collections, I just can never give them 5 out of 5 stars because there are poems that are just, passable, even with the wonderful Rumi. But it's still really wonderful. And I like Coleman Barks' translation of Rumi. I don't know how everyone else feels about it, but I think he does a good job, and I enjoy them. So if you're interested in Rumi at all, or reading something perhaps more spiritual, then I recommend him for sure. And I do recommend this collection. It was good, but I recommend it more as something to dip in and out of and not to pressure yourself to read too much of at one time. Last year I was reading a lot of poetry, like at least a collection a month, and I don't know, I'm just not really feeling it this year. So this, like I said, I started last year and I finished now, and I don't know, I might not read any more poetry this year, but maybe I will. I'm just not feeling it. I was reading a lot of contemporary poetry, and then I got there were some cool things, and then I got a little disappointed, so perhaps that's why I stopped. Maybe I'll read some older poetry, I'm not sure. Maybe I'll take a break until next year. The next book I finished in April was Fudoki by Kij Johnson, and this was published in 2003, and I gave this 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. So, this is set in 12th century Japan and is from the perspective of an aging princess named Rumi. And she knows she's at the end of her life and that she is probably dying. And so she decides to write in various notebooks. And she relates bits of her life at court. And also she relates the story of a cat turned into a woman named Kagayahim. So it's really interesting. From a historic standpoint, I liked it. Obviously, it had magical elements to it, kind of inspired by myths and folklore of Japan, which is really cool. But yeah, I hadn't really read anything set in the 12th century, so that was kind of, in Japan that is, so that was cool. Harume's story I liked a good deal. I think I liked her story more than Kagaihi's, which I'm surprised. I did not think I would like Harume's more. You know, she's just this aging princess or empress, and she has lived a rather unexceptional life, but I just really enjoyed her musings, and I enjoyed her simple stories about love and whatnot. And so that was really interesting. Kakaihi was interesting too. So when she is a cat, there's a fire and it just destroys where she lives, and so she becomes without Fudoki, what she describes as, you know, basically the essence of herself, her story, and her family, and kind of the story of her family. And now she doesn't have this, so it's kind of like she has lost a sense of herself, she's lost her family, and she's kind of lost her history, so to speak. And so she goes along this journey, and she ends up getting turned into a woman warrior. I really liked the magical aspect of her story, being turned into a woman, then back into a cat. I'm a cat lover, so obviously that's why I was part of the reason why I was drawn to this book, and so I liked that aspect of it. And her story too, you know, besides some of the magical elements, has some Shinto beliefs, such as the inclusion of kami spirits and the like, which I really enjoyed. And she goes to war at one point. That's probably my least favorite part of the book. I couldn't see too much point in that section, to be honest. So yeah, it was okay. But yeah, this book was an interesting, you know, story with a magical element, and it was pretty quiet and meditative, and I liked that tone. And yes, it was just this quiet, meditative, kind of magical book about love and life and death and family and stories. Stories in general, history in general, and your own stories and your own history in general. Yeah, and so it was an interesting book. I was hoping to absolutely love this, but it was still a really good book that I do recommend if any of those things sound interesting to you. And I really want to check out more of Kij Johnson's work. She has a short story collection called At the Mouth of the River of Bees, I believe, that I'm fascinated by. There's another book set kind of in the same Japanese myth-inspired universe called The Fox Woman that I'm interested in picking up as well. The 7th book I read in April. I read a lot this month, or at least finished a lot this month, I guess, as you can tell. Anyways, the 7th book I read was Daphnis and Chloe by Longus. And Longus was an ancient Greek writer, and this was thought to have been written in either the 2nd or 3rd centuries, AD, that is. So, this follows a boy named Daphnis and a girl named Chloe. They're found by their parents in kind of mysterious ways, and they eventually become a shepherd and shepherdess. And they spend all their days together, and as is inevitable, they fall in love. And between many events threatening to keep them apart and the simple fact that they do not know how to consummate their love, they have quite a journey to their happy ending. But the gods and goddesses are on their side, and they're helped along by Eros, or Love as he is called in this translation, Pan, and the nymphs. Yeah, I gave this 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, and this was such a delight to read. I mean, I completely enjoyed it from start to finish. I'm realizing I really like ancient Greek literature. I haven't read tons of it, but I'm really liking what I've read so far, and this was just such a delight. And I loved the setting. It's set on the Isle of Lesbos, which is where Sappho, who is an ancient Greek poet that I love, she was thought to have lived there. Anyways, and it was a very pastoral setting that was just absolutely lovely, and Yeah, and it's a very joyful story. It's very comedic and just filled with the sweetness and innocence of young love. And yeah, it was funny because a lot of the incidents that were keeping them apart were just pretty funny and totally ridiculous. And yeah, the fact that they cannot figure out how to have sex is super funny as well. And yeah, and I mean, you can't help but root for Daphnis and Chloe. The way that Daphnis ends up finding out how to consummate their love, I don't think I loved that. That's maybe my least favorite thing. I was like, oh, that's kind of a weird way. Um, but yeah, I couldn't help but root for them and their sweetness and just everything about it was wonderful. Um, yeah, so I highly recommend this if you are interested in ancient Greek literature at all, especially if you think that it's difficult or would be something that you couldn't relate to or get into, because this totally proves that wrong. This is very easy to get through, it's not very long, and I think it's kind of relatable. Like, a bunch of unbelievable things happen, but yet there's just an element to it that if you have, been young once, you would relate to. Um, yeah, so I just really enjoyed it and really recommend it for those trying to get into Greek literature. This may be a really great place to start if it appeals to you all. And I think this is a great one for younger people to read too. Like, I don't know if everyone would agree with that, but I would have really liked this when I was like a teenager. I could have actually really related to them and been like, wow, ancient Greek literature, who would have known? It's so relatable. Um, yeah, so just a totally delightful classic that I recommend to a lot of people. Finally there, so the eighth and final book I finished in April was Love Story by Erich Segal, and this was published in 1970, and I gave this 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. So it was probably my least favorite book of the month, but I still liked it. So this is about a guy named Oliver and a girl named Jenny. They meet while he is a student at Harvard and she's a student at Radcliffe. And, from the very first line of the book, so this is not a spoiler, that Jenny is going to die. So knowing that, you look back and see the progression of their relationship. There's a pretty famous movie from the 70s based on this book, which I grew up with. And I had no idea it was based on a book, and I was in a used bookstore and stumbled across this. And it's just the little things. I was like, oh, that's interesting, I guess. I'll read that. And yeah, the book is pretty similar to the movie, so I feel like maybe I didn't get anything extra, maybe, but it was still nice to read. It was at times humorous and at times very touching, as it should be, especially at the end. Yeah, I don't love books set at university, so I'm glad this wasn't completely set there, but there was kind of a university vibe going on, which isn't, I guess I knew that because I'd seen the movie, but I couldn't remember how much took place. So I'm glad there wasn't too much because, I don't know, for whatever reason, I don't love that. But their relationship was still endearing, although not too developed. Maybe I would have wished for more development, but it was cute. It was funny with their sarcastic humor that they have going on, and touching, like I said, at the end, like you would expect. There's a little bit about parental relationships in here too, which I found maybe a little unexpected, particularly with their fathers, and I guess more so with Oliver and his father. They have a difficult relationship, but yeah, there was a very touching moment at the end that brought a tear to my eye, and I did not expect that to. So, yeah. So yeah, not wonderful, but it's still good if you're looking for, a little bit of an older, little touching, kind of humorous love story. This is, a good one to pick up. It's not the best thing ever, but it's still it's still enjoyable. And like I said, I kind of already knew the story because of the movie, so maybe if you came to this with fresh eyes, you would get something different out of it. But if you have seen the movie and you're really curious, I mean, it is still worth the read, and it won't take up much of your time. It's just not the best thing ever, but it's still good. So, those are all the books I read in April. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you've read any of these books, you want to recommend something to me, please feel free to comment below. Yeah, so I'm all caught up now with my wrap-ups, so hopefully I will be able to do the rest of my wrap-ups throughout the year at a steadier pace. And yeah, so look out for my May wrap-up. Hopefully I won't have that up too late. I'll have it up as soon as I am able to when May is over. I write written reviews of every book I read, and I write them really soon after reading them. So if you would like to read any of those, I'll link both my Goodreads and Tumblr below where I post those. I also post like quotes and stuff like that on Tumblr that I like. Lots of Rumi quotes back from when I read Rumi. If you search Rumi on my Tumblr, you'll find lots of Rumi quotes. But yeah, I just post a lot of quotes in general that I like. Some books I won't post a quote from. Doesn't mean I didn't like the book. I just didn't have any quotes. And others I post a lot from. I also have a Patreon account, so if you want to support me there, always much appreciated. Always can help me out, can help me to expand, and always helps me get books in the first place, which is important since this is a book channel and books cost money. Anyways, I hope to see you all soon. Bye.